Hello and welcome to the 26th episode of Tailoring in Conversation. In this series, I'll be talking to tailors, business owners, cloth merchants, and other industry participants from all around the globe to gain a better insight into their worlds. My guest for today is Timothy Hanchett. Timothy is the owner of a made-to-measure company called Induere Football Club and is currently going through a tailoring apprenticeship. This is one of the longest conversations we've done so far. We're going to be talking about art, tailoring, society, and much more. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. All right, Tim. It's good to have you here. I've been looking forward to our conversation, and I think we have a lot of topics that we can go into in depth. But let's just start by saying welcome and how are you doing, man?
Yeah, it's good to. I was excited to get your invitation, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Were you waiting for it, or were you kind of like approaching it as a let's see how it develops thing?
I don't know if I would say I was waiting for it, but I know we had spoken before about doing an interview. I was thinking about doing like a YouTube series similar to yours for a while, but I don't have the time to pursue it. But it's just funny because everybody that I've asked to speak to, they always say, "Oh, you should speak to Reza because you guys seem like you would have such a good conversation." And I always thought that was so. We've always gotten along pretty well, so I think it's going to work out for both of us.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I asked was sometimes I hear people talk about certain topics, and I'm like, man, I really wish I could be a part in that conversation because, I've got this to say and that to say. But we can't let the people down now that, they've recommended this conversation to happen. So let's have some background information. One of the questions I always ask is, who were you at 10 years old? And I think I've asked that like many times, but perhaps I can ask it in a slightly different way, Who were you at any age before 18 at the moment where you thought, within the next year, I'm going to be a completely different person?
Funny enough, when I was 9.
9. Okay. Who were you at 9 years old?
So when I was 9, I've moved around a lot. When I was 9, my family made a pretty big move, and that was to Spain. So at 9 years old, I was just suddenly enveloped in a complete cultural change. And I think that was probably like the biggest pivotal point in my life. I had moved once before from Wisconsin to New Jersey, but this was New Jersey to a whole new like country and continent, a whole new language. And 9 years old was like the perfect age because I was, I think at my educational peak, I was just absorbing everything around me. So within that first year of being in Spain, I became fluent in a language. I became really close friends with a lot of other people that shared a complete different background and culture from me. And I think that was like huge in the development of who I am today. And not only because I moved around a lot after that, and then to other countries after that, but it, I think, developed my sense of cultural curiosity and wanting to always understand people and get to know people, understand how they tick, what cultures they're from, and why they think the way they think, and how they've developed to become the people that they are. And I think 9 years old is like that. As at least for me, I think for a lot of people, I think it's the same thing. But that's kind of the age where I feel like people just kind of like concrete themselves or mold themselves into who they're going to become. But specifically for me, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but moving to a whole new country, that was definitely the big life-changing moment for me. And that was the second time I've moved, and I've moved 45 times in my life. So
you've moved 45 times in your life.
So around 45. I lost count around 45. So
Right.
maybe
Okay.
47, maybe
Right.
42.
Okay. So
But
I have to make sure that we manage to talk about the 45 times that you've moved, without turning this into 45 hours of storytelling. Cause so hold on, before we get to that, how long were you in Spain?
I was in Spain from 97 until 2004. So 7 years, which actually felt like 17 years. It felt like a while.
Right.
Uh, People always ask me my age, and I always find it funny because I'm turning 34 next week, but I feel like I've had like at least 60 years of experience within my life.
Right.
And so when I think that I'm 34, it's like, is that accurate? But at the same time, because I grew up really like athletic and everything, I sometimes feel like I'm 24. So it's weird, you know, age is weird. But
So when you came back to Canada, was that like, did you go from Spain to Canada, or did you move like different places and then ended up in Canada? How did that go?
so I'm actually from the States.
Right.
I've only been in Canada for 11 years. And that was, I mean, so I've never been good at planning out my life. Every decision I've pretty much made my entire life is split decisions. And I'm trying to be better at planning things. But my experience, plans never work out. So a lot of the times I move, it's just either because of my parents when I was a kid, or because I, in my mind, thought that there was a great opportunity to have in moving to a specific place. Or I'll think to myself, oh, I just watched the movie Taxi Driver. I feel like moving to New York right now. Yeah. And then I did. And that like, I don't like, when I think back at a lot of the stories in my life, which I'm sure you've read in my captions on Instagram, it's pretty wild to think about the things that I've done in my life that like I'm still allowed to, are still alive to be able to talk about.
Okay. Well, I hope to be able to kind of like cover all of that as much as we can. So tell me a little bit about Spain and how that was for you, because when you say you feel like you're someone who has double your age's experience, what I'm curious about then is what sort of experiences did you have that gives you that feeling? And obviously you said one of the biggest moments was moving to Spain. So from Spain onwards, what sort of things did you go through? I mean, how was school for you? How was your friends, your environment? What kind of environment did you really grow up in?
I think part of the culture shock, which I don't think really affected me too much because I've always been a very curious person, and I just kind of took things naturally, absorbed them, and ran with them. And I always found a way to camouflage. However, my siblings, which is their story to tell, so I can't really speak too much on their behalf, they experienced a lot differently than me. I had siblings that experienced a lot of racism, a lot of bullying, but I never really had to deal with too much of that. But when I first moved to Spain, my parents put me in a private English-speaking school. Myself and my older sister, and then my two younger siblings went to public school. And so I learned, everyone was speaking Spanish around me. All my friends were Spanish. So Spanish was on television. We went to church, and church was in Spanish. So I absorbed Spanish really fast. So I don't think I've really needed the American school, especially because a lot of the situations that came up in the American school were not necessarily very welcoming to myself and to my parents. Honestly, there's a lot to cover when it came to Spain, because I absorbed everything, and I feel like I have a good memory on everything that kind of happened. But I was a big fan of sports. I loved football and I loved baseball. And then I moved to Spain, and I remember thinking like the biggest culture shock was, now I have to like soccer. And I did. I loved it. Once I started playing, when I first moved to Spain, I'm like, oh, soccer is like the only sport I've never played. I don't really like. I don't understand it. And soccer was my into my social setting in school.
Yeah.
I remember I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know the sport. One day at recess, I would walk circles around the field, just thinking to myself and just minding my own business. And I remember one day I was just walking around the field and I looked down, the ball hit me in the leg. I kicked it. I didn't really think about anything. I just kicked it. And from half field, it went all the way into the net. And I remember going back in the classroom after recess and all the kids like, oh my gosh, Timothy scored.
He's the hero.
And my teacher was really excited because she wanted to kind of see me become friends with people. And that was it. And after that, I just had a lot of friends. And that was, I don't know, it was like the weirdest thing because I didn't really do anything in my opinion to go out of my way to make friends. I've never been anyone to go out of my way to make friends. I've always waited for people to come to me. And that was
why?
I think moving to all these different places on my life, I've had to say goodbye to a lot of friends.
Right.
And something kids never really want to do. And I've always been one to observe everything around me before I can actually find myself in a position where I can just walk up to it. Because I'm afraid of how people are going to react to me. Some things never change. I still feel that way. If I always feel like if I walk up to somebody and say, hey, man, I like your shoes, it's not going to go well. In my head, they're just going to just scoff at me or they're just going to roll their eyes at me. And then I'll feel really embarrassed and disappointed and stupid in myself for even trying. And I've been that way since I was 9. And I don't know if that's a product of moving around when I was really young or if that was like, I always decided that I was going to let things happen naturally. I wasn't going to go look for anything. But I've always been a yes man. So I would never decline a friend. If somebody wanted to talk to me, I will have a full-on conversation. I'm not good at small talk. I'm good at, genuine conversations. So when kids, especially when I'm 9 years old, approach me and they want to know me for, where I'm from. Oh, you're American? And then, okay, yeah, let's have a conversation about my culture and you can talk to me about your culture because I live here now. So I have to understand more about where I live. And somehow my mom always used to tell me that I used to make really good friends. And I think to this day, I still, and it's not like I single people out. I think we just like kind of attract each other, but I'm also very reclusive. I don't really feel like I get along with too many people. I feel like getting to know enough people might make me more disappointed in the human race. Because you look at it from afar and you're like, man, this world is so chaotic and has so many problems. But then when you get to meet people individually, then you kind of, a lot of that kind of fades away. I usually tell people that I hate people, but I love individuals. And people always want me to break that down for them. And I think it's very accurate for me, at least.
I have a question. Because it's a very interesting thing you bring up. What sort of an image do you have about people that is different than people as the sum of some individuals that makes you separate them as such?
I feel that people have pack mentalities when they're out in society. I think that because I've experienced it myself too. It's just something that I've observed. I'll wake up, I'll have my coffee, I'll get myself mentally ready for the day. And everything that I'm doing is for myself, by myself, thinking for myself. What do I have to do to get to the bus stop, to get to work? But when I was younger and I was running around with groups of friends, I kind of turn off my individual instinct and I kind of follow whatever my friends are doing. So you find I found myself in situations that I probably wouldn't do by myself.
Right.
And I remember waiting for the subway once here in Toronto, and me personally, I know that there's a subway that comes every 3 minutes. But when the subway comes into the station and then the chimes ring, the door's going to close, people start running towards the door.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're thinking that I want to make it to this subway, or if it's because everyone else around them is also rushing towards the door.
Right.
But me, I know there's another one in 3 minutes. And even if I'm late, 3 minutes isn't really going to make that big of a difference. And it was just a observation that I made. And especially like my days volunteering in a refugee house, when you hear about a lot of different political stories and a lot of political situations in the world, and you think, man, the world is just so bad and just so gross. You meet people individually, you kind of get an understanding as to what's going on. I've never liked watching the news because I find it extremely depressing and stressing. It makes me really anxious. So working at a refugee house got me into being able to understand people from an individual perspective, from what they've actually experienced in their life, rather than just reading a news article or seeing it on the news. And there's always so many different sides to an entire situation, and that entire situation will be a group of people where once you get in and meet each individual person that's been a part of that, you'll get so many different stories about what's going on. And then you kind of get an understanding for yourself to know, okay, this is what the situation is right now. And I think that kind of relates to my views on people as a mass versus individuals that are very controlling of their actions and the things that they're thinking, the things that they're saying, the things that they're doing. I think there's a big difference between hanging out in packs and being a single solitary person. And I like feeling like I'm in control of things. So I like being able to have conversations with one people or at a time. So it's, I could probably go on for a long time about like what I find the differences between like plural persons and singular persons. But
I mean, Phil, if you think that you should do, man, nothing's holding you back, man. So I'm actually very interested in what you have to say.
I think I pretty much covered it as a summary.
Okay.
I just find that I enjoy my life more when I get a chance to have a conversation with somebody.
I see.
Rather than if I'm in a lockdown and all there is around me is social media and CNN and everybody's talking, you know, Republican versus Democrat and new viruses are constantly changing and everybody's panicking and everybody's freaking out, and here are all the social issues and everybody's mad and everybody's really upset and everybody just wants to hurt each other. I don't, that doesn't make me feel good. Instead, I'd rather speak to somebody who's had issues in their life and let them know that I do care about them. And if they need somebody to talk to, I'm always here. And that was always my struggle, that I always had a lot of mental health issues with depression and just always being so self-absorbed within myself and within my own thoughts that you hint at somebody, hey, there's a problem. And then they go, oh, I mean, I'm sure there's someone you can talk to about that. But I don't want just somebody to talk to. Like a lot of people tell me therapy, for example, and nothing against therapy or therapists. I don't feel like paying somebody to listen to me is going to be as valuable as having somebody genuinely interested in talking to me.
Yeah.
Even
I
if
agree
like,
with that. Yeah.
Even if I don't want to talk about my problems directly, just having somebody to listen to what I have to say, whether I just want to talk about how frustrated I am that Messi left Barcelona. Like it still helps my mental health, you know. It's just sometimes I don't want to talk about how depressed I am because sometimes I might not know what the root of it is. I just want somebody to talk to and just validate that I'm a human being. And that's always been kind of a struggle with me. I remember in high school, I was an artist. I did a lot of drawings, a lot of poetry, a lot of painting. And I remember looking out my window in Wisconsin, snowy Wisconsin, thinking, when people walk through snow, they leave footprints. And I always remember thinking, I wonder what my life if this snowy picture is someone else's life. And I walked through that snowy yard of theirs, would I leave a footprint? So when I receive a message from somebody, it's kind of a validation that somebody's been thinking about me. So when it comes to conversations with people, I like to wait until people reach out to me, because if I reach out to them and they go, hey, how's it going? And they say, oh, hey, how's it been? It's been a while. It's like I've been thinking about you. I don't know if you've been thinking about me. And a lot of my life has been seeking out validation that other people think about me, which is it. I don't really know how to kind of break down into that feeling, but I don't know. I guess when you grow up being able to camouflage yourself into different cultures, making a lot of good friends, everything's kind of natural. And none of my friends have ever stuck because I've moved around so much. So when I moved back to Wisconsin, very, very small town, Wisconsin, I remember meeting new friends because I was in the hardcore scene. So we'd be going to like garage shows and basement shows and just playing music all the time. And we get a chance to hang out and just talk and get to know each other. And they have nothing to contribute to any conversation. It says, this is what happened one day when I was in Spain. And then when I was in high school in Germany, this is something bizarre that happened. And when I noticed they would have conversations, it was, oh, remember that time in elementary school, went to your mom's house and I had hot chocolate? It was just like, man, I can't relate to this because I've been to so many different places, and some people in very small towns have never left that small town.
It is the case that when as kids, as we are growing up, you do need to have the time as a kid to build a world around you that is familiar to you, where you have a few avatars, let's say a few friends as reference points of, yes, I do exist, and yes, this is the domain in which I exist, and they are kind of like conforming the fact that I'm existing. It's like a confirmation. So, and also what you said about the distinction you made between individuals and people in general, and in the category of people. I agree with it in the sense that, when you talk to individuals, you actually get to see a full story. At least you have the chance to get a full story. But when you look, at the news, or you read about people in general, depending on what the source is, it's always simplified in the weirdest shape, and it's by no means a representation of even the group of people it is supposed to represent. So when you hear, for example, the news and people are talking about Republicans and Democrats, it's not really clear whether the Democrats or the Republicans that are being represented in that story are actually the real Democrats and the real Republicans in the real world. And so you kind of get like a super simplified story that is positioned within simplified categories, and that tends to be annoying. I definitely relate to that, because, when you sometimes hear stories and you're like, how is this even possible that a group of people would think like this or would act like this? And then it's always difficult to know, is the story really representative of every single one of those individuals? Because you can only find out if you really speak to them in isolation. As you say, if you're in a group, it may be that all of them are representative of a certain idea. But if you speak to them individually, maybe they're going to have differences of opinions and feelings about the same topic, So that's interesting. And I also think, to as an extension of what you were saying, a good conversation is really therapeutic, man. So if you have friends or people or colleagues or whatsoever, or even if you're sitting in a bus and someone starts to talk to you, if that conversation is really good, you feel like it kind of like does it changes you slightly. You know what I mean? In a good direction. It sorts out a few thoughts that you had, or you get a reaction of someone else's thinking on your thinking. Okay. You had a story that you once told me about being homeless for a long time, and then you went on to work with refugees, and that was a very big that had a big impact on you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'd like to know the full story, as we only touched upon it briefly on Instagram. But if you feel talking about it, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, again, the story is very long, but I can try to summarize. But it kind of all started with what I said earlier, that I'm not good at making long-term plans.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's always a split decision. And when I miraculously graduated high school, that was my 11th school. So I think I grew up very educationally or confused, because every school has different curriculums, and then English to Spanish to English to Spanish, and then everything kind of in between. But my senior year, I took physical education, art classes, and then obviously passed all those. So I managed to graduate high school, but I thought I was really into art, and my parents were moving back to Spain. So my parents were back in Wisconsin on sabbatical for what they did in their jobs. I was back in Wisconsin the last 2 years trying to figure out social life in high school. And they had to move back to Spain, and I was left to try to make a decision on what I wanted to do. And of course, there was a lot of pressure on me into pursuing college and further education after high school. And the only thing that I thought I was good at was art. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try to go into all these different art schools. And because I had transferred from so many different curriculums, my credits didn't transfer, so none of those worked out. So the last option that I had was to join a community college, small community college in Wisconsin, and try to make up for those credits. And then I was suddenly in this community college taking math and English and social studies and thinking, this is not, what am I doing? This is not what I wanted. And I hated it. I think I had a math class that would be at like 5 p.m. in the afternoon on a Friday. So I thought, I'm not going to, I'd rather be going to shows with my friends and hanging out in basements and just bonding over music and having fun. So I just stopped going to class, and then not going to class just made me realize I don't actually need this. I'm having more fun. So I don't even know if I went to any of my exams at the end of the semester. I just fully stopped going to school. And then I dropped out. The people I was staying with at the time were family friends of my parents, who had boarding students that lived with them. I was sleeping on his couch because he was full.
How old were you at the time?
This was 18. So this was 18. Or 18, 19.
All right. Okay.
If it was first semester, I would have probably been about to turn 19, I think. So I was 18, about to turn 19. And the guy I was living with approached me saying, you know what? Part of the terms of you staying here were you had to either be working or in school. And I wasn't part of any of those categories. So I had to look for something else. And I mean, this was a while ago. I had to refresh my memory, but I remember finding a friend, talking to him about my situation, and he spoke to his parents, and his parents said, okay, yeah, have him stay here. And so that was kind of like the beginning of a big kind of chain couch surfing that unfortunately lasted for 4 years. However, fortunately, those were probably like the most educative years of my life. The most
what
anxious.
Way?
Not at the time, but in hindsight.
Sure.
It was, I lived with a lot of different people. I observed a lot of the different ways people lived. I observed a lot of different people's relationships. I bounced around from house to house. I got to experience how people treat me without knowing who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into that definitely paved a big wide road of misanthropy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't remember. This goes into those 45 times of moving around. I don't even know how many times I bounced around. And the first several times were different kind of like friends from church, so Christian families. And I remember just being in a position where I needed help. And some people gave me help, but it was very authoritative help. That if they're going to help me, they expect this from me. Mm-hmm. And that was tough. The first family that I moved into were very, very strictly religious. And like I said, I was going through a lot of depression at the time as well, because I was in the middle of a situation where I don't know where I was. I got kicked out of a house. I'm living with these people I don't really know. And they would slip manila envelopes under my door every day, and they would give me Bible verses and their interpretation of those Bible verses.
Right.
And I remember them sitting down with me, telling me, you know, God is punishing you with depression because you have tattoos and piercings. And I've always been really good at looking like stuff kind of like goes in one ear, out the other. I always absorb it. Mm-hmm. I never take it to heart, but it's always something I kind of remember. Like, okay, people actually think this way. Mm-hmm. And of course, there were a lot of people that did do a lot of help for me, but I've always been very difficult to manage, I want to say. Like, I've never really looked up to people trying to have any kind of authority over me. Mm-hmm. To this day, same thing.
Just one small question, parentheses. What sort of people do you look up to? Like, what sort of people inspire you or instill some sort of a, I would say maybe some sort of a feeling that you feel like you need to imitate what they are doing in whatever way, because it's just too compelling what they are doing, and maybe perhaps not in an authoritative way.
At the time, I didn't think about it at the time, but again, in hindsight, I was always kind of attracted to people that had some kind of struggle in their life, some kind of pain or some kind of situation that they've had to overcome. And those were the types of people that didn't look at me as somebody who can pay them back for something. They just did it out of the genuine kindness of their heart. And those were always the people that I got really kind of close to. Anybody that kind of gave me the time of day. Anybody who had a fresh snow blanket on their yard that I had my footprints through type of person. Yeah. I mean, I knew I didn't really deserve much from anybody, but I wanted to be treated like a person. I remember moving to California to stay with this girl that I was really good friends with on MySpace. And I grew up in a very straight edge background, no drugs, no alcohol. And at one immature point in my life, I was very vocal about it, but then that kind of stopped once I kind of matured. Instead, I just decided I wanted to try to be a good influence on people. And this girl specifically, I told her, you know, I don't like drugs, I don't like alcohol for these reasons. And they're more humanitarian reasons than like personal, I feel like I'm better than you type of reasons. And she reacted very well to them. However, her roommate suddenly discovered that her roommate, my friend, was no longer fun, told her parents that, oh, by the way, your daughter has this guy living with her. Her parents forced her to kick me out. And that was an ordeal in itself. But to discover a couple days later, after she was going through a really tough time with that because we had become really close friends.
Right.
Her parents bought her a kitten to replace me. And to me, that was kind of like, wow. Trying not to like read into too many things, but some things just hit you once you've actually had to experience it. Mm-hmm. So like the fact that this, kitten, which, I mean, I love kittens, but an attempt to replace a human being, an individual, is to buy a daughter a kitten. And that, to me, that was a big blow to me. Mm-hmm. Especially the more I look back at it in hindsight, just these are, and I think I had met them 2 days before. And at the time I was still kind of like confused with my kind of like religious identity because, just a big whirlwind of spirituality going through my head at the time. But I had brought her to church, and then, her parents thought, oh, you brought her daughter to church. What a great human being you are. It's like, that was always my in to families, was that, oh, I brought your child to church. And they're like, oh, that's great. That's an amazing thing. We like this guy. And then like 2 days later, it completely flipped, and they buy her a kitten to replace me. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned, especially growing up in church, was I wasn't really noticing people living the lifestyle that they preached all the time. Mm-hmm. It's okay on Sundays, but it's not okay the rest of the week to help someone out or to. And so once I left the church and made friends that were with people that were obvious atheists, and I realized, man, like these people have more love than people in church. And to me, that was like mind blowing because I had always been taught the opposite. Mm-hmm. But I remember I got big into, I was big into creative writing. I wrote a lot of poetry in high school, and I got to a point in my life where I started writing short stories just to kind of illustrate things that were on my mind. And I remember writing a story about a similar situation where people look up to animals or value animals more than human beings. Mm-hmm. And it was just a story about a family that take their daughter out on a walk to look at Christmas lights over the holidays. And they walk past an alleyway, and the daughter stops because she sees another child kind of like sitting in that alleyway playing with a soccer ball. And like, oh, I kind of want to play. And the parents are like, no, we're going to keep on walking. I don't want you playing there. Walk past another alleyway and more homeless children she just wants to play with. But on the way home, they hear this kind of like this cry, this whimper, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And they're next to a river. They look over a wall. They see there's a puppy that's been kind of dragged to the surface. So the dad hops the wall, puts himself in the situation where if he falls, he can, get seriously hurt. And he goes down this wall to help save this puppy that they end up bringing home. Mm-hmm. And people liked the story, but I never really wanted to explain to people how I actually felt when I wrote the story. Mm-hmm. But it's I like to use art as a way to get people to open up their minds. Mm-hmm. And like I was telling you about this jacket, it's the same thing. I see a lot of people that are just so closed-minded about things. They like to talk about how accepting they are, but they don't like to show how accepting they are. Mm-hmm. So it's something that people post on social media, and it's like their social stances on specific things, but they've never done they've never volunteered at a refugee house. They've never fed a homeless person. So it's using art or using clothes to create something that makes people look at something differently. Mm-hmm. This jacket specifically, a lot of people just found so distasteful, which in another way I found extremely fascinating, that something that I wear, something that I made, can make somebody so physically disgusted. Yeah, I just find that absolutely mind-blowing, that me doing something for myself can make somebody feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of things that I do are just social experimentation. Mm-hmm. And I've always been that way. It's just, I want to see how people react to the things that I do. Mm-hmm.
I like the thought of creating art with, I mean, in some ways with the purpose of provoking or just creating a reason to think about a subject and looking at it from multiple angles, because thinking is difficult. Good dialogues can help one to think, because you tend to think through a good dialogue as well, right? Whether it's with yourself in a letter or as you're writing a story or with someone else. But a good dialogue is scarce. Not everybody wants to take the time to sit down and write. Thinking without words in your mind is like really difficult. And so artists, as you know, as you being one of them, do provide, I would say, a tool, kind of like in some ways also an entertainment form of a kind of, because you tend to combine intellect, visuals, or music maybe, or even words in a way that gives insight, right? Because a really good artist can make something super complicated super simple to at least for someone to take on board and then maybe chew on for like 20 years. But I like the idea of art in the sense of seeing art as a tool that allows you to think and look at things differently. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, first of all, you beat me to it. So I wanted to ask you, what is really the story behind this jacket? Because I think viewers are looking at this and they're like, am I seeing this correctly? And also, I should ask you, why did you get into tailoring? Like, did you see tailoring as an art form, as an extension of what you just said? So if you could elaborate on those two things, we can get the conversation in that direction.
Such a in-depth answer, but again, to try to summarize,
go for it.
Like I said, I've always been really creative. I've always been someone that wanted to create something, and when I have an interest, I feel like the only way I can really absorb that interest is to partake in it. So I can't just watch soccer on television and enjoy it. I have to go and play it. When I was a kid, I had to play it. Baseball, same thing. When I started listening to music, I go, man, I could write stuff like this. And so that's what made me try to pursue music. I recorded a hip hop album because I loved hip hop. And I feel like that's like my self-satisfaction, is that when I get to actually partake into something that I really have an interest in, I guess in a way I'm very passive, but it comes down to creating. I don't really know how to explain it, but clothing especially. I would go to stores and see stuff off the rack. And this was before I even cared about how stuff fit me. But it was just kind of like, oh, I like this shirt, but I wish the pocket was different. Or I don't like the stiffness in this collar. And I've always been big on my image. So I've always, whatever phase I've ever been in, I've always dressed according to the phase. So I've always really thought out my wardrobe growing up. And that's never stopped. So I've just gone through different phases. If you saw pictures of me from different phases of my life, I looked completely different. And I remember getting to a point where I thought, man, I need to mature. And I watched the movie Crazy Stupid Love. And Ryan Gosling gives this guy a makeover just in suits. And I go, man, maybe suits will be like my maturity, my way of just like becoming a new person, I guess, in a way. Like, it was just my way of trying to like seek out, not maturity, but just like kind of just being a gentleman, like an adult, or someone that people would take seriously. Because I was always part of these kind of like rebellious groups of people, skateboarding, hip hop, hardcore, punk rock. So me becoming a gentleman was like, okay, now I can just have people think I'm more welcoming, I guess, in a way. And then with the whole menswear interest, which started by going to thrift stores and trying to find stuff as inexpensive as possible because I didn't have a lot of money, I would look at stuff like, oh, this would be fun to try to figure out how to make. And I just had this interest in menswear, wanting to figure out how to make stuff. But this was when I had moved to Canada. I ended up getting a work permit, got a job in retail, thinking, oh, maybe I can work in suits. Maybe this can be my way of, working myself up towards what I want to be, or just to like dip my toe in the water and feel this out, see where it takes me. But I got a job in like women's shoes, and I wanted to be in menswear, but I thought, okay, well, this is at least my in. I can maybe transfer to another department in the future. Shoes was cool because then it taught me a lot more about footwear. And although my interest was menswear, that was my trajectory, I'm still learning about other things in the meantime while I'm working towards this goal. And through great customer service, I suppose, the general manager, this is a massive store in Toronto, the general manager singled me out and said, hey, I see you with customers and I really like the way that you treat people. If there's anything you ever want from me, just let me know and I can see what I can do. I said, I kind of want to work in menswear. He was, okay, let's make it happen. But he didn't put me in tailoring. He put me in contemporary menswear. So I was selling more avant-garde stuff, which was not what I wanted. But at the same time, I'm still learning from the stuff that I'm selling. I'm looking at stuff like Philip Lim, and I'm looking at these patterns. I'm like, man, this is kind of cool how he makes one T-shirt with just 2 pieces of fabric. That's interesting to me. And I was never really, I didn't know much about pattern making. I knew what the details were that made things different. And when I would sell, because we sold suits for more contemporary brands like the Kooples and Tiger Sweden and stuff like that. So if I was selling a suit, I would call the tailor to do the alterations. Then I would really pay attention to how he's doing these fittings. Eventually I left that job, got another job. And because tailoring in Toronto was pretty much non-existent, still kind of is, bespoke tailoring, for that fact, you have a lot of people that say they're bespoke, and me really wanting to get into that bespoke industry, figuring out how to get myself into tailoring. I didn't really know too much because I was more eager to learn things. But Toronto ended up becoming the place where I learned more what not to do than what to do. And as I kind of developed my knowledge on what bespoke is, I realized that most people that call themselves bespoke are not actually bespoke. And that led me into a lot of disappointment because a lot of the people I looked up to were all people that I felt like misguided me, because I would find out later they weren't exactly what they were saying. And to me, the next step to becoming someone has this kind of like bespoke trajectory, I thought made to measure would be, my way of, I guess, graduating myself towards what I kind of want to accomplish. And I had no idea I would ever become a tailor or an apprentice or anything. I remember wanting to become an apprentice, and I had asked so many different people that I would find on Instagram. It's like, hey, what is the route I should take? Because I'm interested in apprenticeships. And then the people that I would find that would do kind of like bespoke out of their basement type of thing in Toronto, because there's a couple people here and there that do that. I would ask them, hey, if you like, I would love to learn anything, like if you have any time to teach me. And I was just constant, just denial. People would tell me, sorry, I'm not busy enough. Or people would say, oh, sorry, I'm too busy. And it never really worked out. So as I got into my former job, which was made to measure, I just took it and ran with it and tried to do everything I could with made to measure. And then I learned a lot about fit. Right. And then I had quit that job just because I had a lot of personal conflicts. I felt like I wasn't valued. I was never told thank you for the hard work that I had done. So I thought, you know what? I have to respect myself. And I felt like the only way I can respect myself is by leaving this job. And surprisingly, a lot of clients were very, I had a lot of my clients would invite me out to dinner where we would talk about men's, we would talk about my career path and all that kind of stuff, see what my interests were, because a lot of people really liked my attention to detail. I was making suits for people that they never thought would fit them as well as stuff that I would make would be. And I never really give myself credit. I mean, it's made to measure. It's just, okay, let me take your measurements and let's make a suit. But then when it came to doing alterations and all that stuff that I had learned just by watching other tailors hem pants or taking waists and stuff like that, really paid off, because then I got to the point where I would start to understand why shoulders should be sloped, and hanging out with other, like, social media was my like social life, where I would meet different tailors and they would tell me, oh, this is what the issue is with this, and this is how you fix that. And some people would send me books, and some people would I remember live videos on Instagram. I don't think a lot of tailors do them anymore, but I remember watching a lot of these videos of different tailors in Italy. They would do fittings on their Instagram lives and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I was really alert. And after the pandemic, which was right after I left my last job, I had job offers everywhere, New York, California. And then the pandemic hit. It's like, now I'm kind of screwed. But there was a company in Toronto that claimed bespoke, and a friend of mine was a part of it. And so I thought, okay, well, they want me to work for them, so let me do this. So I wanted to talk to them and see what it was that they wanted from me, and they just want me to do sales. And I hate sales. I hate being in commission. I hate being rewarded for what I'm selling, because I genuinely hate materialism, and I hate feeling like I'm tricking people into spending more money when I just want people to have a passion for something, and that's why they want to test it out. So this job role was just cold calling people, and I was like, I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And so I used my LinkedIn time to connect with other tailors in England and Spain and Mexico and Germany, and just try to get to know anyone I can, and just same as Instagram, just try to build relationships with people that I might never meet, but people that I know can teach me a lot of different things. And because I'm speaking to people in different parts of the world, I'm absorbing the different ways that they do things. And I'm, you know, like, this is my museum. Like, I'm so excited to learn about the different ways of doing things. And the time that I wasn't online, I was hanging out in the tailor shop, asking questions to the tailor and watching him cut patterns, and I'd watch him do fittings. And then I'd see him do fittings, and then I knew there was something that I saw that maybe he didn't see. Say, oh, maybe the balance needs to be fixed before you do that. And then I think he approached me because he was making me a suit. And I got to the point where it's like, oh, I think the pants have an issue with the rise. I just think that we should shorten the inseam. I think the outseam is good. I just want to shorten the inseam a little bit just to fix that pitch. And he goes, okay. He comes out to me like 2 minutes later from the back. He goes, you know a lot about tailoring. I go, yeah, I'm passionate about it. Like, I don't care about selling. Like, I care more about the craft and what's going into it, and just the small, tiny little details. That's all I care about. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to sell. And then Toronto had so many series of lockdowns. And during the last lockdown, which was this time last year, he sent me a text and he goes, hey, would you want to be my apprentice? Like, yes, please. Like, that's it. That's all I want. And he goes, okay, when he was on vacation at the time, he goes, okay, when I'm back, we'll figure it out. And nobody could afford to pay me anything, but I've never cared about money. Like, all my best jobs, all my most like personally developing jobs were jobs where I was either a volunteer or jobs where I just wasn't making any money at all. And I never went into a job thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make as much as I want, or these guys aren't going to pay me, I don't want to take the job. It's never been that case for me. It's my investment is in my growth of what it is that I'm passionate about. And it got to a point where we were feeling it out. I was really enjoying it. was a very fast learner because of a lot of the other stuff I had absorbed throughout those last 6 years. And he was impressed. He told me, I was learning a lot faster than he had expected. So he was really happy in his decision on bringing me aboard. I had a lot of my own dilemmas because a lot of the stuff that they were doing was more on the lines of really kind of like fast bespoke. It wasn't really fully detailed. A lot of machine work instead of like lapel padding by hand. It was all kind of like blind stitching. And I wanted to use my hands. It's like, if you want me to, you don't have to pay me for it, but I'll pad the lapel and just teach you how to do it. So I was just learning kind of like little things here and there, buttonholes. I was really enjoying buttonholes. I was so determined to see how good I could get with buttonholes. So I would do when I go, I don't like it, let me try to do another one. And so I was always just trying to get better every single time I do something. And yeah, I mean, it hasn't even been a year. Right? It's only been, I think it's been about 10 months now, or what was it, March, I think last year. So yeah, about 10 months. And I'm enjoying it, but I find that I get into these roadblock situations where I'm not learning in depth the things that I want to be learning.
What do you mean with in depth?
I want to learn how to draw a pattern from scratch rather than tracing a block. Right. I want to learn pocketing rather than just being given a jacket and them telling me, okay, attach the lining for this one. Oh, I just did this one, attach the lining to this. Oh, I just, this one needs a buttonhole. So I started feeling like I was more kind of assembly line bespoke. Right. And I wanted to, which is totally fine because they kept having me fell sleeves into the armhole. I'm like, oh, I hate doing this. But then it got to a point where like I started seeing like I would start doing better and better. I'd start getting faster and faster. Go, okay, now like let me see if I can top what I did last time. And then I found myself enjoying it. So I enjoy it, but I feel like there's more things that I know I need to learn and that I want to learn, specifically assembly. Like in my head, I want to be able to draw a pattern, cut it, assemble it, do a fitting, take it apart, reassemble it, and it'd be perfect. Rather than trace the block, do a fitting, fix the block, reassemble it, and then give it to somebody else to put all the finishing touches, put the facing on. I wanted to like, I watched your interview with Marco last week, and you had talked about there are people that say they want to learn everything, but there are people that specifically do coats or they do pants only. And you go, oh, I don't think anybody can really take in everything. Well, I'm that person. I want to literally learn everything. And I think that's what I'm going to be determined to. I just want to learn everything. Like I want to get to a point where I can do jackets and just think, man, okay, I'm going to move into pants now. I'm going to move into shirts now. Like I'm so like, I think that was my problem too. I remember talking to somebody who wanted to help me find an apprenticeship last year. And they go, okay, what is it you want to do? If you tell me what you want to do, I can try to narrow down who to look for, what I can try to find for you. And I go, I literally want to know everything. I don't know. If somebody says, okay, well, we have a position where we can just teach someone to do buttonholes, like I would take that. Or if all we have right now is someone to iron pants, like I'll take that. I'll leave my life in Toronto and I'll go to France or Spain and I'll just iron pants for a living. Like I'll do it. But I like to understand everything 100%. I don't know. I've always been that way. It's just, once I get to break down into small details, I get a better picture. And it's the same with art. Like you look at a painting and you look at brush strokes. I like looking at paintings first up close so I can see the small brush strokes. And then I close my eyes, walk to the end of the room and then look at it. Man, it's so cool. Like it makes you appreciate art more. And tailoring for me is the same thing. It's looking at how different people do shoulders or looking at how other people have their shapes of lapels and figuring out what it is that I like about different things and then how it is that they made them. And tailoring, I guess fashion in general, like because I've always been creative. I love architecture. I love history. I love fashion. I love the idea of costume, I guess. Like, or not love. I've always hated the idea of costuming. I've always thought fashion was something that people did for an impression that they want someone else to have of them. But tailoring kind of covered everything. Just, you're creative. You're creating something in an old school way, because I've always been into anything old fashioned and old school, and just things that people do with their hands, and the long cut way of doing things. And I mean, I don't even know. I got into photography. I got into painting, but one thing that I always noticed in my life was once I started taking something too seriously, I began to hate it. So with tailoring, I never wanted to get. I think I lose the joy in doing it when it becomes a chore. Wanting to.
What do you mean when once it becomes a chore?
Once stress, I guess, is involved, or once it might be, because I've never actually thought about it. It might be that when somebody tells me I have to do this, when I was painting in school, it was like, okay, well, today we're going to do still lifes. It's like, I have no interest in still lifes. I don't want to do still lifes, but that's what I was being graded on. And it's like, I don't want to do this. Like that's, I remember I had a art teacher that said, we never use black. If you're going to use black, you have to mix paints to make black. And I understood it completely. I thought that was a great way to look at doing a painting, because I understood I don't want that opacity in all my paintings. So, but still, I don't like people telling me what to do. So I went home that day. Of course, I didn't do any homework for any of my other classes, but I took out a canvas and I did a painting in black and white. And I gave it to him the next day. And he's like, there's something about you. I tell you not to do something and you do it, but I love this because I want to hang this up in my room, but I'm afraid that everybody else would get the wrong idea because I tell them to not do this. And that's my jacket, you know, like people tell me, oh, don't do that. I kind of want to do it now. The more people tell me not to do something, the more I actually want to do it. I do. There's a great tool on Instagram that I love doing, which is polls. And if I say, okay, should I make an orange suit or should I make a green suit? And people will vote whichever way that they vote. I don't usually go with whichever has the most votes. A lot of times I go through and see who voted for what and whose opinions I value more. And if you were to vote on something, okay, well, I understand Reza to be this kind of person, so this is probably why he voted this way. And I kind of like the idea of what I think is why he voted for this. So let me go with that. So it's always a matter of statistics for me. It's just who am I going to piss off and who's going to really appreciate it? That's kind of like the idea into everything.
Do you enjoy pissing people off with your art?
Oh my gosh, yes. A lot of times it's why I do something. I know I showed you a picture of my punk suit with all this and everything. Yeah. That was specifically a middle finger to classic menswear. I made that specifically to put on Instagram just to see what people would say in the comments. And that one was funny because people actually really liked it. And I was trying to think outside the box. I was trying to upset people, and people really enjoyed it. I got really stupid comments on it, but like a lot of the stupid comments I got were just like, oh. But same with this one. This one was like the juxtaposition of a casual blazer with a more formal double-breasted jacket, and I combined the two. And I don't tell people what it is I'm wearing. I wait for their reaction when it hits them what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
I'll have people stop me on the streets like, oh, it's nice to see people still in suits. And then, oh, thank you. And then we get into like a small little conversation. And then they look at me and go, wait, are you wearing, what are you wearing? And I like that. I like that reaction. I like when you can't see things at first. Like this purple jacket was specifically like that too, because the two different plaids are pretty much the same colors. But when I turn around and you can see the obvious difference between the two panels of the back, then it's like, whoa, I didn't realize this was two different fabrics. Yeah. I like when people kind of have that reaction to the things that I do. So it's not always about upsetting people. It's just showing people the unexpected.
Well, here's a question in that regard. So I relate heavily with the rebellious attitude and pissing people off with your work, perhaps sometimes being provocative. And at the same time, what I've experienced is that when you are trying to master something, part of it is on your own, when you're, the baby steps behind it, and now you have to repeat it so many times until you have it fully under your control, right? But some part of that is also dependent on someone else. Let's say a master that you meet somewhere who you can trust, but at the same time, who you don't always agree with fully. Now, if you're the type of person that likes to do things exactly for the reason that someone tells you not to do it, how can you discipline yourself through a tedious apprenticeship in which a certain period is definitely dedicated to listening to what the master has to say and almost, not always, almost blindly trusting that they understand the process in a way that it may not make sense to you, but the instructions that they are giving will lead you to the at least the best possible route to mastery. Because there is this idea, right, that and I think this was from Nietzsche when he said, nobody can really be free until they have experienced a period of being a slave, whether it's symbolically, slave to the trade, slave to your art, to your craft, or perhaps even literally. But let's take the symbolic route for now. How can you be a slave to your craft if you're so rebellious that you actually prefer to do the things they tell you not to do?
I think it comes down more to the respect that I have for the person, because my authentic trajectory is to learn. And it's not until after I've learned how to do something that I want to do the opposite. It's more of, just because a rule is there doesn't mean it has to be broken. It comes down to just rationalizing why things are there specifically. I mean, I like the tailor that I have because he's very open-minded. And even though he's been doing this for 4 years, he's still really interested in learning new things. So he brings me aboard, and it gets to the point, like when I'm making jackets for him, I do them the way he wants me to. When it comes to making a jacket for myself, it's like, let's try something different. And I remember I wanted something really unstructured with very little padding in it or very little canvassing. And I remember, because we would buy prefabricated canvas and then I would assemble it and go, I kind of don't want all of these layers. What are each of these layers for? And he goes, oh, well, this is for this, this is for this, this is for this. And when it came to the nice cotton swabbing piece, I go, is this necessary? He's like, yeah, it's necessary because this and this and this. And then I brought him the next day a screenshot of an Italian, I think it was an Italian or a Spanish tailor, who was just kind of did a boomerang of twisting his jacket that he was working on and didn't have that. I go, well, this guy didn't use it. So then my tailor goes, okay, let's try it. And now there are a lot of times where he also takes off the dovette, what's it called?
Domet.
Yeah. And I think it's cool because he's constantly willing to learn new things. And I've noticed a lot of changes that he's made since bringing me aboard. Because before I really knew much about tailoring, or not the amount that I know now, but when I had everything kind of like sitting in my head before I was an apprentice, I'd watch him make stuff, and it got to a point where he started wanting to ask me my opinion on things. And usually I don't like when people ask me my opinion, because I won't give my opinion unless it's asked. I learned that lesson the hard way. But I started sharing him different posts from Japanese tailors and Spanish tailors, and go, oh, what do you think about the way he does the shape of his lapel or something like that? And I'd listen to what his feedback or critique would be. And I've noticed his change in the things that I don't like that he does, just visually, not necessarily
that is very interesting, you know, that is extremely interesting to hear.
He's very proud about how well he makes pants, but I'm very specific with pants. Like, pants for me are like, I always want them to fit perfectly. And like, my idea of perfect is like, I'll try to make sure there's not a single wrinkle anywhere. I don't want the pleat opening up like a millimeter. Like, I want everything to be perfect, and I want to figure out how to fix each pattern so that it does always look perfect. And he would do basic fittings for jackets, but not for pants. And he would start doing fittings for people with the pants already made up. And I mean, there's issues that could have been prevented if you had done fitting. So now it's getting to the point where I'm telling him, you gotta start doing basic fittings for pants. And it's just interesting to see the changes that he makes as a tailor, which he knows. Like, he's been a tailor for so long. He's Parisian trained, and he's very specific on fit as well. But he has been a tailor in a society that has no idea what bespoke is. If he does a buttonhole by hand, he'll have someone complain that it doesn't look good. Like, it doesn't look like it looks perfect. Why does this buttonhole look this way? Or if he would proudly say, you know, I hand padded these lapels, that's why they have such a nice roll. And the guy's like, okay. And it's like, you know, that's an extra 3 hours of my time to pad lapels. It's like, I'm not going to bother doing it if nobody appreciates it. So I think, like, I've never really asked him. I feel like a lot of the stuff that he's very proud of doing in his craft, he's stopped doing because people just don't care. And I care about those things. I'm passionate about those things. So I'm starting to see things come back. But Toronto's a tricky place. Toronto's a very...
Well, you know what? One of the things that it makes me think, what you say about the tailor you're learning from and you're working with, is what is really the essence of being a master or becoming a master. And sometimes, you know, there are obvious explanations, like, you know, the person who's technically most capable, or the person who has the most experience, or whatsoever. But there seems to be, for me, something beyond that. And it brings me to questions like, you know, who is really a master? And is it the person who fails the most and learns the most from those failures? Is it the most curious person, even if they're not technically most capable or competent? Is it the person who has the most experience and the most perfect system, but has no creativity? You know, which one is it, or the combination of which ones is it? What do you think? Like, if you would use all your experiences that you described briefly in this an hour and a half conversation, who would you categorize as a true master within a craft?
I've learned quite recently. There's a friend of mine that moved here from Trinidad, who went through tailoring school through what's his name? the Trinidadian tailor on Savile Row.
Maurice
Maurice
Setwell?
Setwell. Sorry?
Maurice Setwell, yeah.
Yeah. So he did his training through him. He came looking for an apprenticeship, and he ended up on our doorstep. And he didn't last long. He left pretty quick. But we became really close. And through him, I had all my complaints. You know, I wish this, I wish this, I wish this, I wish this, I wish I was being taught this and that. All these other things that I want to do. And he told me, he goes, your expectations are way above anyone I've ever known. Like, you're a perfectionist to the extremes. It's like, my expectation is to get to a point where I can, with 100% confidence, take on a customer, convince him to be as 100% confident as me, to make him a suit from the measurements I take, to the pattern that I make, to cutting it, to doing the basic fitting myself, to taking it apart, reassembling it, finishing it, doing all the buttonholes, doing all the pick stitching, and then giving it to him.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what I want. But as I'm beginning to meet different people, everybody has a task. Everybody has something that they're good at, something that they're dedicated to. So I still like having my expectation that one day I'll be able to do all that. But I also realize that it's not necessarily a realistic goal. At least for the time being. Like, it's going to take a long time. But I also am extremely fearful that I'll get to a point in my life where I won't have anything more to learn. And
why are you fearful for that?
I think the joy of being passionate about something is the adventure of learning something new and constantly learning new things. And I just want to keep learning. It's like, I would hate to get to a point where, then that deals with a lot of my confidence. Like, I'll have, like, when I'm doing a fitting at work, This is one of our tailors. And I go, I'm not a tailor. I'm an apprentice. To me, there's a difference. Yeah. And I was wondering, somebody who asked me, like, okay, when do you think you would become confident in being called a tailor? And I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, I need to get to a point where I feel like I'm confident enough to be called a tailor, or to call myself a tailor. And then, because of all the people that I've met in this journey, all ended up being a disappointment to what I thought they were. Once I got to a point where I was knowledgeable enough in the field, until I know everything, I feel like I'm not going to be confident. So it's tricky. Maybe I'll just never call myself a tailor. I'll just tell people, I make suits. But I don't know. I think that will one day manifest itself to me, and I'll be more confident in general in what it is that I do. And I just want to continue learning things. And if I know there's more things to learn, then I want to, that's basically why I said that those 4 years of my life being homeless are some of the best years of my life, because I was in a point where I was so distracted in my depression and my anxiety and my stress that I wasn't realizing that I was in California in the foothills of Yosemite, in one of the most beautiful places in the world. And once I got out of that situation and I was working full time, I was so stuck and I wasn't doing anything. Of course I would never want to be in a situation where, that I was in those 4 years, but I want to have that sense of adventure. And I feel like the more passionate I am about a craft like tailoring, I'm continuously on this adventure. Like, I never really thought I'd ever go to Pity, but because I know a lot of my friends that I've connected with on social media go to Pity, this is my chance to get to know everybody in one place. So I started going to Pity. And it's not, people had like, I remember people saying stuff like, oh, he just wants to go peacock and all that kind of stuff. And it was never about that. It was like, I want to know people. I want to get to know people. I want to meet people. I want to experience this. And then suddenly it's like, man, I'm in Florence.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty cool. Like my trajectory was to meet people, but now I have this new experience of being in Italy and being in Florence. And then now I have this curiosity and interest to understand more about Florentine culture. And now I'm watching documentaries and understanding, you know, the history of Florence and stuff like that. And tailoring has kind of given me that sense of just constantly learning new things. I'm trying to learn Italian on Duolingo, which is probably not the best app to learn the language, but like if it wasn't for tailoring, like I probably wouldn't care to learn Italian, you know? It's I don't know, it's exciting. And then because I'm bilingual, I speak Spanish, it's been able to build really good conversations with people like Marco in Mexico and then my friends in Spain. Even though it's all on social media right now, it's still opened a lot of doors for me to be able to continue and experience just like random things that I never would have thought. Like I've been in Toronto for 10 years and I got to a point where I'm like, I have to get out of here. I can't like, I've moved 45 times up until I moved to Toronto. And now that I'm 34, that means a third of my life has been in Toronto where I haven't moved. And there's 2/3 of my life was just constant chaos of just traveling and meeting people and experiencing new cultures. And now tailoring technically has kind of brought some of that back for me. And it's exciting, you know, so I don't want it to stop.
No, I can imagine. I mean, it is the journey eventually that makes the person. Once you achieve the pinnacle and you've reached the absolute top, you can only do two things. You either stay there, which is unlikely because you probably freeze to death, or you have to just walk down again and make room for someone else, you know? And so I would rather die on my way to the top than reach the top early or whatever that means, and then die on the top. Because the earlier that happens, if you don't continue climbing perhaps a bigger mountain, then you're kind of like done, really.
The way I look at it is the same situation, but once I get to the top, I'd be trying to help other people get to where I am.
Yeah, you can climb the second mountain together with them.
Yeah, and that's the way that I find also, like, it's not going to bore me to death, is that if I'm teaching somebody else, I'm still, in a way, teaching, I'm still learning something new by teaching other people.
Yes.
And I've discovered that as well. So that's like the way people have treated me in the past is not the way I want to treat people going forward. And that's why I really enjoyed leaving homelessness. And that pivotal point was being a volunteer at a refugee house, was one of the most like fulfilling jobs that I feel like I've ever had, because one of the topics that you've been bringing up a lot lately has been, we're just making clothes, and how do we reflect on that? And I've kind of been struggling with that in a way, because like I've had people that will fly in for a consultation with me from another country. And of course, I'll be willing to talk about anything that they want. But then I have a lot of local friends that will come in and they'll say, oh, let's talk about, what Brooks Brothers did in their catalogs in the 1950s. Like, I don't care about that. Like, there's other things in the world. Like, this is what refugees have to go through right now. This is what the housing crisis looks like in Toronto right now. And I want people to understand those things, because that's something that relates to everybody. And I feel like it's more important than making clothing. But clothing for me is also my art in a way. Like, the one person I look up to the most in the fashion industry that's ever lived is Alexander McQueen, because he would do stuff also just to piss people off. But in people off, he would open up so many people's minds on a lot of the situations that were going on in the world. And like getting fired from Givenchy because they thought that his show was too controversial, even though he was trying to bring up a social perspective on how people are being treated somewhere else in the world. Fashion relates to a lot of people, and if you're creating something in fashion that relates to those people, I think people don't have an understanding unless they gain perspective. At least that's what I've always found. You can hear about refugee camps your entire life and think, oh man, that sounds bad. But then when you get a chance to sit down with somebody and they get to tell you your experience with them, then you have a perspective, and now it becomes more understanding to you. And now you actually know how to feel about different things. And I think fashion, it relates to a lot of people. So if you're making something that tells a story, you get a chance to kind of like dive into that a little bit, and you get to change people's lives through it. But sometimes you're just making gray suits for people and blue suits for people. But when you make a 2-on-2 jacket, like, I'm not really saying much of a social point with this jacket, but the seed that I'm planting is to get people to think outside their box. But so that's why on Instagram, I stopped just writing captions about the weird stuff I was wearing and why I don't like wearing black with blue. But instead, let me tell you a story about something that happened in my life that I feel people, like, it might not be as bad as other people's lives, but this is something that's happened. And this is something that I've been reflecting on for a long time. And because I'm telling a story about my life, I feel like it would give someone perspective as to what's going on and how people are treated, and how people struggle with different things. And I don't have like the world's biggest struggles, but I want people to realize that I'm there to help anyone going through any struggle, because I've had people turn me away for things that I've been struggling with, and I would hate to be that same type of person.
Plus, you have been replaced by a kitten.
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing, Tim. What you say about, telling these stories is absolutely right, because once you start to tell a story that you have lived, then you tend to tell a better story as well, and you tend to expand that narrative a lot better, because when people who feel a little bit empty, right, and they desperately need something that they could see as a justification of their existence, and so they seek this purpose, whatever that means for them, right? And finding your purpose is very different than just choosing and picking a purpose. You look at this catalog of what are the purposes in this world. Should I go and change the world financial system? Should I overthrow capitalism? Or should I start a revolution somewhere? And those things are very attractive to a lot of people, because the bigger the problem, the more unlikely that you will actually have a solution for it. And so the more likely you can continue whining about, the biggest problems in the world that people like to kind of like bring out. Whereas when you're telling your story and it's really authentic to you, and then you present that story along with like something thought-provoking that you've created as you've done, then people tend to actually listen, because when you say, I've moved 45 times, my radar goes up and I'm like, what happened to you? Whereas when someone says like, oh yeah, everyone, there's like really people are doing this and they're going through wars and blah, blah, blah. And they haven't gone through wars. That doesn't attract anyone, because you're just like, there's no difference between you and a news headline. And people are, at least as from what I've concluded from our conversation, people can be more than just a news headline, but not everybody wants to put in the effort to really search for their story, and things that they have experienced.
Yeah, it's I don't like a lot of the, like, especially when it comes to nationalism, because it's obvious I'm a pretty big anarchist. But a lot of the situations that I find in Canada, a lot of a lot of the situations I find in Canada is that Canadians are very proud of who they are, and this probably goes for every country. Like I'm American, and it's just as bad there.
Yeah.
But people get into this position where like, oh, Canada's the greatest country in the world. You know, what makes it greater? What makes it greater than the United States? What makes it greater than Russia or Spain or Rome or Greece? You know, like Greece has an immense history behind it. So does Italy. What makes Canada better than anybody else? And, people are so addicted to the drama with, you know, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, and it was just like all you hear in the news. And this doesn't even really like relate to us. It has nothing to do with us. And our politicians are just as bad and just as absurd and just as big of clowns as they are in the States. Like there's people in Canada think, oh, you know, it's a great country. Let's look at the world for our entertainment, you know. But we had a big situation in Canada this last year, which I had known of because I've been very interested, or not interested, but a lot of the literature that I read is by Indigenous authors and a lot of Indigenous rights. A lot of my friends growing up were Indigenous, so I got really big into understanding a lot about Indigenous culture, a lot about Indigenous rights. And in Canada, we had something called residential schools, which is where the church and the government got together to, you know, throw Native children into this school where they're literally beaten into civilization. And this year they discovered a lot of bodies under a lot of these old houses. And a lot of Canadians are like, I never knew this happened. And what drives me crazy is that, you know, this is your country. You're so proud to be in this country. And a lot of times, like, nobody was ever given the option to what country they wanted to get born into. So I don't see how you can be proud in something like that. It happened, you know, this is where your parents gave birth to you. This is, you know, how can you be proud of something like that? And then you get into this situation where people are so proud about their politicians and they're proud about their history. And then something rises in the news where it's like literally tens of thousands of children were killed that were like from 2 years old to, you know, and up. And then it wipes out a whole like genocide of people, and people suddenly like shocked that this ever happened. And I mean, it's an educational system, it's a political situation. It's like there's a lot of problems in the world. And then I remember, because when I was working at a refugee house, I was also in conversation with other houses, homeless shelters, other nonprofit organizations. One of them is this house that is dedicated to basically getting girls off the streets. Toronto, which not a lot of people know, is one of the biggest sex trafficking hubs in North America, but nobody talks about it. And so when it comes to like trying to figure out a way to expand people's eyes, just open people's eyes, like that's what I use my captions for on Instagram. So a lot of times, like, people will be insulted and offended by the things that I say, and I've gotten a lot of comments of people just trying to troll me and all that kind of stuff. But like, there's just so much out in the world that I want people to just be like, clothing to me, like that has nothing on a lot of the social situations in the world. So that's why I've always been kind of like trying to figure out what ways clothing can change my life. Because I'm constantly, like, it's hard during the pandemic, but I'm constantly looking at different volunteer jobs that I can look into, maybe like once a week or whatever. And I don't have money to donate to things. So I'm always trying to figure out how I can help anyone in any way. But like I said before, sometimes it's just having a conversation with someone.
Well, I tend to agree with that. Shall we do a speed round and then wrap up the conversation before we get into the, because we can talk for hours about this.
We might have to do like a part 2 or a part 3.
We'll see how that goes. Let's do the speed round. Tell me one word, right? Because if you start tell the entire thought line of anything that I'm going to present to you, we're going to go into like another 3 hours, which I don't mind. But all right. So first of all, Spain.
Sorry?
Spain.
Like Stay?
No. Spain as in Spanish.
Oh, Spain, the country.
Yes.
This is where poetry comes in handy, but I honestly don't have an answer. I haven't been there since 2008.
Development. Culture.
Necessary.
Taxi Driver, the movie.
Mental health.
A good conversation.
Therapeutic.
Literature.
Education.
I'm trying to read my handwriting. The act of creation.
God.
Apprenticeships.
Curriculum.
Mastery.
Confidence.
Quality.
Longevity.
Tailoring schools.
Sorry, tailoring school?
Tailoring schools, yeah.
I want to say rebelliousness.
Okay.
Just because school is in that. And I hate school and I'll rebel against school all the time, just curriculum in general.
All right. Okay. Art or technique when it comes to tailoring?
Believe it or not, technique.
All right. Okay. If you could change one big thing about the tailoring industry, what would that be? Or maybe one small thing.
I think it's big. I would say criticism, because a lot of those people that I asked to help me out are people that message me telling me I'm doing stuff wrong without giving me any substitute information. So just, you're doing it wrong, rather than any kind of it's tough. You had the conversation about what's right and what's wrong with Marco, which is an interesting conversation in itself. But the people that I've asked to help me in tailoring or to teach me new things that told me, oh, I don't have time or I'm too busy, are all people that now want to criticize what I do. And to me, that's like, it's frustrating. But at the same time, I'm at a point where I'm at least being watched. So it's a blessing in disguise in a way, because people are noticing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But they're all people that at one point turned me down, which is motivation in itself for myself. So that's...
Yeah. Okay. All right. Savile Row.
Mecca.
All right. And tailoring in Toronto. Or Canada, for the same matter.
Lack of nurturing.
Would you say the same about America as well? Tailoring in America?
I think the States is doing a much better job at trying to preserve it. I know more American tailors than I know Canadian tailors. I live here. So yeah, I think, because I know that there are several tailoring schools in the States. Canada, from what I understand, doesn't. But Toronto, for example, has so many different fashion programs. But they cannot even seem to manage a Toronto Fashion Week because they keep losing funding and they keep losing sponsors because, like, not just tailoring, but Toronto fashion in general, that there's no footprint, which is ironic because there's so many fashion schools, but the fashion schools, from the people that I've spoken to that have participated, they don't learn how to make patterns from scratch. They'll learn maybe how to like manipulate or change a pattern, whether it's for dresses or t-shirts or anything else. And because Toronto's a very capitalistic society, everybody starts their businesses because they see an opportunity to make money, not because they're really passionate about things.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody that has any contact with factory anywhere, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's the type of fashion industry that Toronto is. It's just people that have a factory, they'll draw a picture, they want it made, and then they sell it. And a lot of the, like, I think I counted about 34, probably 37 different men's like made to measure companies in Toronto, which is a lot. But I mean, I can probably count on one hand how many actual tailors or crafted tailors there are in Toronto. And half of those made to measure businesses will tell people they're bespoke. Yeah. So I think the problem is that the customers are not being educated in a way that they should, because there's nothing wrong with made to measure, but there's everything wrong with telling people that you're making stuff the way that they're not expecting you to be making them. And that's where I think the problem is, because now the customers will go to different companies just to try a different company, say, oh, I've gone bespoke here, I've gone bespoke here, I've gone bespoke here. And then it's like, let me be the one to educate you. It's just a very competitive industry in Toronto, and I'm trying to. My goal in Toronto right now, aside from the apprenticeship, is to just build friendships with other businesses, because everybody's ripping on everybody. Everybody's trying to say they're better than everybody else, but unlike a lot of my friends in Spain, there's no community where people can actually accept that they do things differently from other people. And they want to take business away from other companies, and it's just, there's no support for anybody. And it's just trying to, it's the salesman approach to menswear, where it's just, you should buy this because it's the best thing you'll find anywhere else, even though it's not. But the customers don't know that.
Okay. The last one. Timothy, the person.
Adventurous.
Adventurous. Sounds about right. All right, man. It's been one hell of a conversation. I think it's the longest conversation I've done so far. I've enjoyed every second of it. And
likewise.
I wish we had more time, and maybe we'll do a part 2 and we'll talk more about the subjects that we are covering. So let's see how that goes. Thank you for making the time, and I look forward to speak again, man.
Yeah, thanks a ton for the invitation. I was excited to receive it.
Sure thing. And that was Tim. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. What did you think about the topics we discussed? Please share your thoughts in the comment section, as I would like to know what you think. If you want to see more of Tim, check out the links in the description of this video. And if you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to this channel. Until the next time, bye-bye.